Welcome to Epic Ancient Mysteries, the channel where ancient mysteries come alive. Today, we're diving into 5 ancient civilizations that vanished without explanation. Get ready to explore the secrets the past still refuses to give up. Sea People Civilization. In the twilight of the Late Bronze Age, around 1200 BC, the Mediterranean world plunged into chaos. Great civilizations that had dominated the region for centuries, powerful kingdoms like the Hittites, the Mycenaeans, and the Mitanni, began to collapse one after another. The causes remain murky, but in many accounts, a shadowy force is mentioned again and again: the Sea Peoples. They appeared without warning, striking from the sea in swift, brutal attacks. Coastal cities were sacked, trade routes were disrupted, and long-standing political structures crumbled in their wake. Egyptian inscriptions from the time of Pharaoh Ramesses II and later Ramesses III describe fierce naval battles against these mysterious invaders. In one account, it is written, "They came from the sea in their warships, and none could stand against them." Unlike typical raiders, the Sea Peoples didn't simply pillage and flee. They came in large numbers, sometimes with families in tow, suggesting intentions beyond mere conquest, perhaps resettlement. But no definitive record exists of who they were or where they came from. Some scholars believe they may have been displaced peoples from the Aegean or Western Anatolia, fleeing drought, famine, or political turmoil. Others suggest they could have been a confederation of tribes from southern Europe or even the Balkans. They brought fire and ruin wherever they landed. The Hittite capital of Hattusa was destroyed. Mycenaean palaces were left in ashes. Entire regions that once bustled with commerce and culture fell silent. Yet despite the magnitude of the upheaval, the Sea Peoples remain elusive. Egyptian reliefs depict their ships and weaponry, and even capture fragments of their battles, but offer no consistent name for their origin. The most puzzling aspect is their sudden disappearance. After their failed attempt to conquer Egypt around 1178 BC, they vanish from history. There are no ruins tied specifically to them, no known homeland, and no burial sites. Their impact was monumental, yet their identity and fate remain unknown. Did they merge with local populations, abandoning their identity? Were they ultimately wiped out by stronger forces or internal collapse? Or did they, like a storm, pass through history and dissolve into myth? The Sea Peoples left behind no chronicles of their own, only destruction and unanswered questions. They remain one of the greatest unsolved puzzles of the ancient world, a force strong enough to topple empires, yet too fleeting to leave a name. Greenland Viking Civilization. Around the year 985 AD, Norse settlers from Iceland and Norway began arriving on the shores of Greenland. Led by Eric the Red, they established 2 major colonies, the eastern and western settlements, bringing with them livestock, tools, and the traditions of Viking society. Against all odds, they thrived for centuries in one of the harshest environments on Earth. By the height of their occupation, Greenland's Norse population likely numbered in the thousands. They built farms, churches, and trade networks that stretched as far as Norway and Iceland. Their goods included walrus ivory, sealskins, and Arctic furs, items prized in European markets. The Greenlanders were deeply Christian, constructing stone churches and maintaining contact with the bishopric of Scandinavia. Despite their isolation, they were part of the medieval European world. And then, they vanished. By the early 1400s, the western settlement had disappeared. When a Norwegian ship arrived at the eastern settlement in 1721, centuries later, it found only ruins. The inhabitants were gone. No signs of battle, no graves filled with corpses, no records explaining what had happened. Just abandoned farms and empty churches, slowly being overtaken by ice and moss. For years, historians believed the Norse failed to adapt to Greenland's unforgiving climate. It was assumed they clung stubbornly to European farming methods unsuited to the rocky soil and long winters. But recent studies challenge that idea. Archaeological evidence suggests they hunted seals, stored food, and even adjusted their architecture to the colder environment. So why did they disappear? Some researchers believe that environmental change played a role. Around the time of their disappearance, Greenland entered a period known as the Little Ice Age. Colder temperatures shortened the growing season and made travel by sea more dangerous. Trade routes to Europe may have broken down. Others point to shifting political powers, Norway's decline, the rise of the Hanseatic League as reasons for their growing isolation. Yet none of this fully explains how thousands of people vanished without a trace. The last written record from the Greenland Norse is a wedding announcement dated 1408. A couple from Iceland married in the church at Valsey, the eastern settlement's most well-preserved site. After that, silence. No diaries, no farewell letters, no stories of migration or disaster. Just centuries of quiet and a handful of bones beneath the frost. What happened to the Greenland Vikings? Did they die slowly, quietly, one farm at a time? Did they leave, blending into Inuit communities or vanishing across the sea? Or were they erased by something history no longer remembers? Whatever the answer, their disappearance remains one of archaeology's most enduring cold cases. Axum Civilization. In the highlands of what is now northern Ethiopia and Eritrea once stood one of the most powerful and advanced empires of the ancient world. The kingdom of Axum, rising to prominence in the first few centuries AD, was a civilization of traders, engineers, and warriors, commanding vast territory and controlling routes that connected Africa to Arabia, India, and beyond. At its height, Axum rivaled the great empires of its time. Roman historians wrote of its influence. Indian merchants traded with its ports. Coins bearing the faces of Axumite kings have been found across 3 continents, suggesting a reach and economy few others could match. Its capital, Axum, was a city of monumental stone obelisks, multi-story buildings, and intricately carved tombs. They built with stone, farmed terraced hillsides, and developed their own written script, Gizi, still used in Ethiopian liturgy today. The empire embraced Christianity early, becoming one of the world's first Christian nations, long before most of Europe. For centuries, Axum was a beacon of wealth, power, and innovation. And then it fell silent. By the 10th century, Axum had faded into obscurity. Its capital was abandoned. The trade routes it once controlled passed into other hands. The great obelisks, some still standing, were all that remained to hint at what had once been. What caused this mighty kingdom to vanish? Historians point to a number of possible culprits. Climate change may have played a role. Geological records suggest a dramatic shift around the 6th or 7th century, possibly reducing rainfall and shortening growing seasons. Soil degradation from centuries of intensive farming could have compounded the decline. As resources dwindled, maintaining large cities and armies may have become impossible. Others suggest external pressures. The rise of Islamic caliphates reshaped trade across the Red Sea, isolating Axum and cutting off its access to vital markets. Still others believe that internal strife, possibly sparked by religious or dynastic conflict, hastened the collapse. One legend tells of a warrior queen named Judith who led a rebellion that burned churches and toppled the royal family, but archaeological evidence remains scarce. Whatever the truth, the fall of Axum was not marked by grand battles or written records. It simply disappeared from the historical stage. No final message. No collapse etched in stone. Just silence. Today, the towering steely and weathered ruins of Axum remain scattered across the northern Ethiopian landscape. They stand as silent sentinels of a forgotten empire, one that once shaped the ancient world and then vanished into history's shadows. Catalhoyuk Civilization. In the heart of modern-day Turkey lies the remains of one of the oldest known cities in the world, Catalhoyuk. Dating back nearly 9,500 years, this Neolithic settlement was home to thousands of people long before the rise of Sumer, Egypt, or the Indus Valley. And yet, despite decades of excavation, the story of its people and their sudden disappearance remains buried in mystery. Catalhoyuk was no crude village. At its peak, it spanned over 13 hectares and housed a dense network of mud brick homes, tightly packed together with no streets in between. Residents walked across rooftops and climbed down through ladders into their homes, each one nearly identical. No palaces, no temples, no visible seat of power. Inside these homes, archaeologists have found vivid wall paintings, animal skulls mounted like trophies, and human burials placed beneath sleeping platforms. Some skulls were even decorated with plaster and ochre, suggesting a form of ancestor veneration. There were no signs of warfare, no fortifications, and no monumental structures. Yet, the society appears to have been highly organized, complex, and enduring for more than 1,000 years. What makes Catalhoyuk so unusual is not just its age, but how advanced and egalitarian it seems to have been. Every household had access to the same tools and food storage, and there is little evidence of economic or social hierarchy. Some researchers believe it may have been a peaceful society built on shared beliefs and communal living. But even utopias do not last forever. Sometime after 5700 BC, people began to abandon the city. Gradually, the population declined and construction ceased. By 7,500 years ago, the once thriving settlement was silent. No records explain why. No enemy destroyed it. No disaster buried it. Just a slow fading until it was gone. Theories abound. Some suggest environmental changes, drought, soil exhaustion, or disease. Others point to shifts in social structure, changing trade routes, or even cultural transformations that made city life less appealing. Still others propose that Catalhoyuk wasn't abandoned at all, but transitioned, its people moving to other regions, carrying their knowledge elsewhere. But none of these theories have been proven. There are no written texts, no names, and no clues beyond the walls and bones left behind. Today, Catalhoyuk remains one of archaeology's most carefully studied sites. Yet despite thousands of artifacts uncovered, the mystery only deepens. Who were these early city dwellers? Why did they leave? And what happened to their vision of a society without kings or war? Perhaps the answers are still buried beneath the clay, waiting to be found. Rapanoui Civilization. In the vast emptiness of the southeastern Pacific Ocean lies a small, isolated island that has captured the world's imagination for centuries. Known today as Easter Island or Rapanoui, it is home to nearly 900 towering stone statues, the Moai, silent guardians of a vanished civilization whose fate remains one of archaeology's most haunting mysteries. The Rapanoui people are believed to have arrived on the island around 1200 AD, navigating thousands of miles of open ocean in double-hulled canoes. When they landed, they found a lush island filled with palm forests, birds, and fertile volcanic soil. They built villages, developed sophisticated farming techniques, and carved the Moai, massive figures reaching over 30 feet tall and weighing up to 75 tons. Each Moai was carved from volcanic rock and transported miles across the island without the use of wheels or large animals. They were placed on stone platforms called ahu, facing inland as if watching over the people. For generations, Moai carving became the center of Rapanoui culture, a spiritual and social act tied to ancestor worship, power, and prestige. But by the 17th century, everything began to unravel. When European explorers arrived in the early 1700s, the great statues had toppled. The palm forests were gone. The once thriving society was reduced to scattered groups living in caves, with signs of famine and internal conflict. What had happened? Some historians believe the Rapanoui exhausted the island's resources. Trees were cut down for firewood, agriculture, and to move the Moai. Without wood, they could no longer build boats for fishing or escape. As the ecosystem collapsed, food shortages may have led to civil war, statue toppling, and even cannibalism. Others challenged this narrative, suggesting the collapse came later and was triggered not by ecological disaster, but by European contact, bringing disease, slave raids, and cultural devastation. There's also evidence that the Rapanoui may have intentionally stopped Moai production and changed their spiritual beliefs long before collapse. What remains unclear is why a society capable of such monumental achievements would risk everything to continue building statues. Why they stayed when resources vanished. Why no written record survives to explain what they believed, or how they understood what was happening. The Moai still stand, or lie fallen, across the windswept plains of Rapanoui. Some buried to their shoulders. Some half finished in the quarry, as if abandoned in mid-thought. Their carved eyes are long faded, but their presence remains. The island is small. The questions are vast. What happened to the Rapanoui? Why did their world crumble? And what secrets might still lie beneath the volcanic soil? These ancient civilizations left behind ruins, relics, and questions that still puzzle historians today. As we uncover more clues buried beneath time, one truth remains. The past doesn't always give up its secrets easily. Don't forget to subscribe for more ancient mysteries waiting to be explored.